Good afternoon. The Thursday, February 22nd Executive Committee will now come to order. We are convened as of 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to please mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Please note that committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meeting, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are also providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this CART service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided to you. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. At this time, I will now call for the roll of committee members. First Vice Chair Catlin. Second Vice Chair Geisinger.
I'm here.
Secretary Guzman.
I am here.
Treasurer Bouquet.
Present.
And this is Chair Davidson. I am also present. That is 4 committee members present, 1 absent. I do believe First Vice Chair Catlin will be joining us, so I will note for the record when she does. Also, we'll note for the sake of the record that we are joined by Director Tisdale. Thank you for joining us. Are there any other directors present that I have not noted for the sake of the record? Seeing none, we'll move forward. I'd also like to thank all members of staff who have taken the time to join us today and be here in the afternoon. I'll now move to the public comment section. This is open to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, you may please email the RTD board office again at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Are there any members of the public that have their hand raised to speak? I'll now ask Mr. Kroll from the board office to assist in identifying.
Hi, Chair Davidson. This is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. There are no individuals present who have indicated a desire to provide comment.
Thank you very much for that. And also, Mr. Kroll, were there any emailed comments received for today's meeting?
We have not received any emails in advance of this meeting desiring to provide public comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. Also, I will note for the sake of the record, we are now joined by First Vice Chair Catlin, and as such, all members of the Executive Committee are present. We'll now close the public comment period and move into the recommended actions section of our agenda. There are 2 recommended actions this afternoon. As a reminder for committee staff and anyone watching or listening to the meeting, any actions that are passed by the Executive Committee, even if the vote is unanimous, will be included on the board agenda under recommended actions so that the full board will have an opportunity to discuss the measure presented. The first action for consideration by the committee this afternoon is Senate Bill 24-032, and this is for a support position. This is for the Board of Directors to adopt a support position on Senate Bill 24-032, otherwise known as SB 32, methods to increase transit use. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Guzman.
Second, Geisinger.
The movement is Secretary Guzman, and the second Vice Chair Geisinger. Thank you very much. I'll now turn over the floor to Mr. Michael Davies, our Government Relations Officer, to please present this item.
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. As stated, this is a recommended action to adopt a support position on Senate Bill 24032, methods to increase transit use. I know the board has received previous updates on this bill as it's moved through the interim committee of the Transportation Legislation Review Committee, and has now gone through its first hearing, is up for its next hearing next Tuesday, the 27th, in the Senate Finance Committee. I'll just briefly outline the bill. It really does three things. First, the Ozone Season Transit Grant Program, which is the grant program that was previously administered through the Colorado Energy Office. That grant program is set to expire July 1st, 2024. So this bill would remove that expiration and continuously fund this grant program into the future. It does also move the administration of the grant program to the Department of Transportation from the Energy Office. The next major action that this bill does is creates a Zero Fare for Youth grant funding program that would be administered through the Department of Transportation. And then the third major action is that it creates an exploratory committee that really is looking at a statewide transit pass and gives direction to that exploratory committee to produce a viable proposal with an implementation plan into the future. And so those are the three main things. There was a personal income tax credit that was associated with this bill when it was originally drafted. I think due to from the author's remarks during the first committee, that was removed out of this bill largely for fiscal note purposes and wanting to have a different separated conversation on that tax credit from this bill. So those are the three main areas focused in the bill, and I'll end my remarks there and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davies, for your report. I'll open up for any questions and discussion. Second Vice Chair Geisinger, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Michael, thank you. And thanks for all your work on this. You know, I'm a big supporter. I just was curious, the financial impact section of the board report said that there could be a financial impact if the amount included does not cover the Zero Fare for Better Air. Is there no financial, there wasn't anything listed for the youth fare program. Is that because we believe the cost is less than the amount available, or what's that about?
Mr. Davies, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Director Geisinger, for the question. That is a good point. I suppose that is a little bit of an oversight. There is a possibility currently as funded in the bill. And again, this is from RTD's estimates of what it costs to implement a Zero Fare program, which were largely produced as part of the Reimagine effort and the fare study and equity analysis. And so if there was extra cost, yes, that would produce a fiscal impact for the agency if the grant funding for some reason wasn't enough. And I guess I could have been clearer in stating that in the board report.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. And I'll now, General Manager and CEO Johnson, I saw your hand come up on that. If you'd like to speak on that issue, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Davidson, and thank you, Director Geisinger and Mr. Davies, for addressing the question that was posed by Director Geisinger. Recognizing that these are financial forecasts relative to what our fare box recovery ratio would be, recognizing that we must be good fiduciaries of taxpayer dollars, I don't want to minimize the fiscal impact, but recognizing where we are on the projections that were made in light of Mr. Davies' comments relative to our implemented fare structure, we had taken that into consideration when we looked at our financial forecast going out for the next 6 years. We believe that we would be able to accommodate that with the notion that providing zero fares would yield a return on investment to actually entice others to want to utilize the system as we go forward. So when you look at our overarching budget, we're talking about a percentage of a fiscal impact being in the single digits from a percentage vantage point. So just wanted to add that context. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Ms. Johnson. That is helpful context. Yeah, please, second Vice Chair Geisinger.
just to say thank you. I don't question that at all. I think it's a great program and worth all our effort, and just was curious about that. But thank you both.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? I just wanted to note, first of all, thank all those who testified in support of this at committee. And I'd like to highlight for those who didn't have a chance to listen in or see that a particularly inspirational and why we do what we do was seeing a number of young folks who showed up to testify in support of this and talk about the impact that this has on their lives. There was also very powerful testimony from Denver Public Schools about truancy rates and about access to education. It was very powerful seeing that testimony, not to diminish any of the testimony that members of this board and our general manager and CEO and members of the community gave. But what I think was especially inspirational was seeing young folks show up and talk about access to education and access to the opportunities of the region. So just wanted to highlight that for folks who didn't have an opportunity to hear that inspirational testimony that I think reminds us all why we do what we do. With that, I will call, are there any no votes on this action for a position of support of Senate Bill 2432? Seeing none, the motion will pass with 5 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 0 abstentions. Thank you very much. And once again, Mr. Davies, thank you for your report, and not just your report, but also your tremendous advocacy and work that you've done on this. Moving to our next recommended action, our second and final recommended action is the board meeting accessibility pilot policy. This is for the board of directors to adopt the attached board and committee meeting accessibility pilot policy. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have the movement as first Vice Chair Catlin, and I heard this second Vice Chair Geisinger. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to Mr. Jack Kroll, our Executive Manager of the Board Office, to present this item. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair Davidson. Just real quickly, want to run through the highlights of this policy and then talk about the change and why the change and the recommendation was made, and then happy to take any questions. This idea was introduced to you all last month around how can you all enhance your accessibility at board meetings, the baseline that's provided. You all are always and already complying with all of your obligations under the ADA and Civil Rights Act. But there was some idea that you all could take those requirements and go a little bit further and offer enhanced accessibility. And what this policy is going to set forth for the next year, the balance of this year, so about 9 months, is that the board office will coordinate and provide CART services at all of the board's meetings by default. In previous worlds, without this policy, I should put it this way, you all would provide that service at your meeting upon request only. And so this defaults the practice to being, we will have CART present and available at all board meetings. In addition to that, we will have available the CART transcript, the capability to automatically have that CART transcript appear in Spanish. And so what that means is we have a captioner here present, they're typing in the transcript in real time, and then there's a software that automatically translates it into Spanish. This would be in effect until December 31st of this year, or whenever the board may choose to act further on this. There had been some discussion and some direction provided by the board to also provide Spanish interpretation services at its board meetings. However, after receiving that direction, I did some additional research, and when it came to light that the city of Aurora, who we had been looking to as a leader in this space, what they're actually doing is different than what I had informed you all they were doing last month. And what they're actually doing with respect to automatic Spanish interpretation services is they're providing that at their city council meetings for purposes of allowing the public and anyone in public to make comments in Spanish and have those interpreted into English for the council's edification. And so that was a different way of looking at the issue. And given that information, I think the better route to go is to offer the CART transcript and have that automatically translated into Spanish. And the board office will continue to monitor and track how well utilized those services are. And when we revisit this conversation at the end of the year, offer you data on how well utilized these services are so that you can make a more informed decision moving forward. I want to also thank Carl and Carl Green Jr. and Gabe Christie for their help on this. As we move forward in this endeavor, we will continue to work closely with the Civil Rights Division to make sure that we're meeting all of your obligations under those previously mentioned federal requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll, for presenting the item. I'll also note for the sake of the record that we have been joined by Director Ruscia. Thank you for joining us, Director Ruscia. Again, Mr. Kroll, thank you for the report. And Mr. Christie and Mr. Green, thank you very much for the extensive work and assistance to the board office on this. At this time, I'll ask for any questions or discussion on this recommended action. Yes, Director Ruscia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to note that LA Metro does provide access in both English and Spanish. I'm disappointed. I'll just say I'm very disappointed to hear in the executive committee's change in this latest update. A significant portion of our writers do speak Spanish as a first language. And we as an agency have made some improvements in how we communicate and provide access, but we have a long way to go. So I guess I just wanted to share that feedback. But one thing that we can do that costs us no money is share more widely how people can access our meetings. For example, if someone were to request interpretation services, they would have to dig pretty deep into our website, find a board meeting agenda, click on that, and do it on the right day because we are not posting this information freely, and pull up a PDF, scroll down and read in English where you can find interpretation services in Spanish. And so those are the things that I think we also need to be looking at. How do we broadcast that information, whether you need an accommodation or you are needing interpretation services. We are required to provide meaningful access. And speaking as a director, where about 2/3 or more of my writers speak Spanish as a first language, I just felt like I need to pipe up and say something and advocate that we do more, particularly in the areas where, again, it costs us no money. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Ruscia, for the comments. Mr. Kroll, is there anything, I know that there had been a change here in the process. I know you addressed that in the presentation. Is there anything further you'd like to say on the matter? And if not,
Sure. Thank you, Chair Davidson. The only, I think Director Ruscia's comments are well taken. We can certainly look with the new website on ways to add language there to indicate more, how would it say, so that the viewing public or the public had an easier way to know that these resources could be requested. And that's feedback well taken, and we can certainly look into it.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. And yes, thank you, Director Ruscia, for highlighting the challenges with the website there. Secretary Guzman, please.
I'll defer to Director Ruscia for the moment, but I'll make a comment as soon as she is done.
Okay, wonderful. Director Ruscia, I see your hand went back up. Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, Director Ruscia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also appreciate my colleague's grace there. I just wanted to add that since we moved to a new website, I have had individuals who regularly attend or attend our meetings tell me that they can't find our page and our information. So I just wanted to note that. Also, it is best practice, when putting out announcements and sharing how to access interpretation services to put that out in multiple languages. And so I just wanted to put that out there as well if we are actually considering making some changes to our website.
Thank you, Director Rusha, for the further comments on that. Duly noted. And now I'll go to Secretary Guzman.
Thank you. So I will make it brief but quick. Two things. One is interpretation is different than translation. We need to make sure that we're using the correct language. Interpretation is the verbal communication from one language to another when you are changing the language. Translation is written translation services. So CART is technically going through a translation service, but a human that would be speaking into a microphone would be interpreting. That's my area of specialty, so I just want to make sure that's clear for everybody and that we're using the right information in our presentations. I've talked to Mr. Cole about that, and so we got that cleared up. That's one piece. The second piece is I do understand Director Rusha's comments. I also worry about access for Spanish speakers in particular, being the largest minority language that we serve as a population in Denver, as evidenced by doing our website in English, Spanish, and I believe it was Chinese Mandarin, if I'm not mistaken, following shortly thereafter. Looks like we've gotten Vietnamese up as well. And those services are requestable, but they are difficult to find that information. So I'm not sure how to make that more available to the public. But I am excited either way that I will be able to look at a transcript in my native language while we're having conversation when I get stuck, because that's a lot of what the note taking that I'm known for is, trying to figure out quickly how to capture an idea that's being expressed. So I do look forward for this coming to the board, and I am in favor of it at this point. It doesn't mean that it's over. I think it's just a starting point to launch us off to more accessibility, but it's a large elephant that we're trying to contain, and so small bites are often better. That's where I'm at with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Guzman, for the comments, and thank you for the specificity of the language of interpretation versus translation. And thank you for echoing Director Rusha's comments around overall accessibility to find those services. Certainly something that I'm sure we can all work on here collectively. So thank you for the comments. I'll now move to Second Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thank you very much. And thanks to both of our colleagues for those comments. I think they're helpful. And Mr. Kroll, for your response, that you'll be able to address some of that. Can you just circle back with us in a memo or something at some point and let us know what you're able to do to make that more accessible? Thank you so much.
Will do.
Thank you very much, Second Vice Chair Geisinger, and thank you, Mr. Kroll. First Vice Chair Catlin, please.
Thank you for all the comments. And I just want to state the old cliche that perfect is the enemy, or let's not make perfect the enemy of the good. This is a pilot project, and there are opportunities to certainly tweak it and make it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First Vice Chair Catlin, here on that, with taking important steps in the right direction, just as Secretary Guzman had stated. I think it's very well stated with respect to this being a pilot program. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, thank you. I'll also call for the vote now, as I did for the last recommended action, by asking, are there any no votes on this action? Okay, again, with 5 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 0 abstention, the motion will pass. Thank you very much. With that, we'll now move on to our February board meeting agenda review. Is there a motion to move the February board agenda to the board meeting on February 27th?
So moved, Bouquet.
Second.
The motion is
Geisinger.
Thank you. The motion is Treasurer Bouquet, the second as second vice chair Geisinger. Thank you. I want to call everyone's attention to the second item on the draft agenda, which is the installation and swearing in of a new board member. As we know, Mr. Jamie Lewis has been appointed by the mayor of Denver to fill the vacancy in District A that was left by former Director Williams' resignation. Our best understanding is that the Denver City Council will take up the matter of confirming Mr. Lewis during the meeting on February 26th. Assuming that the Denver City Council does indeed confirm Mr. Jamie Lewis, we will plan to be swearing him in at the next evening at our February 27th meeting. I'd also like to note that I have invited Mr. Lewis to attend and participate in our retreat this Saturday, as I believe it is critically important that we have the participation of all directors that would be serving on the board this year. So with that being noted, I'll ask if there is any further discussion or any questions concerning the agenda for February 27th. Yes, I see Secretary Guzman. Please go ahead, sir.
On this one, we have an external entities report from Front Range Passenger Rail. Will somebody from Front Range Passenger Rail be coming before this board to have a conversation? Or will it be our liaison CEO, GM Johnson, who will be providing that service?
Thank you, Secretary Guzman. Yes, we will have Andy Carcian from Front Range Passenger Rail. So I see that General Manager and CEO's hand is raised, who of course serves as an ex officio member on the board of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. So please go ahead to provide any additional context that you would like.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the questions posed. Recognizing what Chair Davidson did comment on, yes, it will be Andy Carcian providing an update on the efforts of the Front Range Passenger Rail undertaking as it relates to their service development plan and other elements, specifically when coordinating with the executive manager of the board office. It was placed under external entities, recognizing that Mr. Carcian is external to the organization. And so wanted to have you all be aware of that going forward, that it's merely to ensure that there is an understanding of what's happening with that undertaking, recognizing the synergies and operational efficiencies, especially as we look at the enabling legislation that brought forward the Front Range Passenger Rail District and my role as an ex officio member to that board of directors. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please go ahead, Secretary.
Will we have anybody coming before the board from either the governor's office or anywhere else, just simply FRPR? And I ask because we have all seen the news and the submission to the public of a white paper that is a coordinated effort. And so I'm just curious.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Guzman. I'm happy to start with the answer. Then I see Ms. Johnson, you had raised your hand and would invite you to add any additional context you'd like. No, it is not my understanding that the Front Range Passenger Rail District will be joined by anyone from the Colorado Department of Transportation or from the administration, being Governor Polis's administration. Seeing that the Front Range Passenger Rail District has been moving forward with its own efforts in pursuit of a service development plan, I believe the intent of this update is to hear specifically with what has been transpiring with the Front Range Passenger Rail District. This update is certainly, I think, timely and important. It has been since 2021 that this board approved a cooperation agreement between RTD, CDOT, and the predecessor of the Front Range Passenger Rail District, which was the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. So I think this is just to focus on the Front Range Passenger Rail District and is separate from the press release or the white paper that is now on the CDOT's website, which has put forward the concept of a potential joint powers authority that the state might consider. With that, I'd like to open the floor. Ms. Johnson, I did see your hand was raised, and recognizing your role with the Front Range Passenger Rail District, if there's any further context you'd like to offer, I would certainly welcome that.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Davidson. I believe you answered the question, because recognizing that CDOT nor the governor's administration are in employee capacities, I qualify my statements by saying there is representation on the board of directors by a representative CDOT. But yes, you qualified the intent going forward recognizing that in the enabling legislation, it talked about there would be reports being made to the RTD board that will be modified somewhat going forward, but I don't want to speculate on any proposed legislation relative to that, but you summed up the intent, so I have nothing else to add to your comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Secretary Guzman, thank you for the question. It's an important one, given that there are all these multifaceted things being discussed in a very public way. And so, Secretary Guzman, I want to open the floor back up to you for any other, if you have any further questions or clarifications on that.
I do not at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I'll now move to Director Ruscia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to offer a few points of information. The first is that FRPR does meet today, and their agenda is on their website. Joint Powers Authority is on that agenda. The Zoom link is there, and I would just encourage directors to hop on that one after this one if you have time. Second, regarding the legislation moving through right now, that bill is public, the language is public. Currently, it removes the requirement for FRPR to copy its annual report to the RTD Board of Directors. It also would remove ex officio's executive privilege in certain cases that does include our GM CEO. So I just wanted to apprise my colleagues of those two matters in case they had further interest. They know where to look. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ruscia, for highlighting all of that. Very much appreciated on those comments. And Ms. Johnson, I see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very kindly. I just want to qualify a point of clarification. The Front Range Passenger Rail District Board meeting is tomorrow, Friday, February 23rd at 9 a.m. So I just want to offer that up. They do have study workshops and things alike, but I just wanted to make the distinction between the two. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Kroll, I think this is, given the importance of this, I'd like to request, could we send out an email to directors with the link and meeting information to ensure that all directors know where to find this and how to join?
Certainly, happy to get that out.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll, much appreciated. Director Ruscia, I see your hand is still raised. Do you have further comment or question on this?
Just, Mr. Kroll, I will send you the information for the study meeting today that commences at 1 p.m. in case you want to get that out as well, since there are two meetings happening this week. But the joint authority discussion is also on their agenda for 1:15 p.m. today for a workshop. But I think both points of information I think would be helpful for those who are interested.
Thank you, Director Ruscia and Mr. Kroll, and thank you for being willing to coordinate to disseminate information to the full board. I'll now move to First Vice Chair Catlin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Director Guzman, asked the question, but given that there are a lot of moving parts and ancillary pieces, the report from the Front Range Passenger Rail is really, as I understand it, limited to their activities and not some of these other pieces going on. So I would encourage us to be disciplined when we ask our questions, not to talk about or speculate about other matters that are going on. That's just my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that point of view, First Vice Chair Catlin. Yes, certainly a easy thing to be speculating on, and thank you for the reminder with respect to this being focused on the work of the Front Range Passenger Rail District and any potential intersection it may have with RTD's efforts. Other questions or discussion on the agenda for which we have the movement as Treasurer Bouquet and second Vice Chair Geisinger? Yes, Director Ruscia, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to know when that packet will go out. I'm particularly interested in seeing the staff's presentation on their light rail replacement plan, and having access to that as soon as possible, I think would help us because it will be the first comprehensive discussion this board has had on the matter.
Thank you for the question, Director Rusha. I see Mr. Kroll, your hand is raised. Would you like to comment on the timing of the packet?
Yeah, thank you, Director Chair Davidson and Director Rusha for the question. We had a board office meeting earlier this morning and we're still waiting on a few more materials related to the packet. The ambition would of course be to get it out as soon as possible. I would say it's likely that it will go out tomorrow at the latest.
Thank you for confirming that, Mr. Kroll. Thank you, Director Rusha, for the question. Are there any other questions or discussion with respect to the agenda? Are there any no votes to moving the agenda forward to the February 27th board meeting? Seeing and hearing no votes, that is again 5 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 0 abstentions, and the agenda will move forward. Moving on to discussion items, we do have 2 discussion items on the agenda this afternoon. The first is the monthly government relations report for February 2024. Mr. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. Again, thank you for your work here. This has been a busy year, so I very much appreciate your work and your willingness to engage with us and present these reports. I'll hand the floor off to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. Just a brief government relations report. First, starting at the federal level, as reported to the board last month, Congress was able to pass a continuing resolution to keep funding federal programs. They did a split on that. The US DOT programs are funded till March 1st. There has been movement and some agreement to top line funding figures, and that is a very key step in Congress to moving toward being able to complete appropriations bills. The House is currently not in session and doesn't plan to come back into session until late in the month. So there will be a tight timeline to get it through the Senate, get it through the House, and have an actual full appropriations process completed for fiscal year 24. At the federal level, we'll be watching that closely, and we'll report to the board on the outcome of those discussions. Moving over to the state level, much of the written report in the beginning focuses on Senate Bill 24032. Having had just had a discussion on that in the committee, I will not go through that bill again, other than just to remind you all that the next hearing is next Tuesday in the Senate Finance Committee for that bill. There is one piece of pending legislation that was introduced this week and is not in the written report, and it doesn't necessarily have a financial or direct impact to RTD, but very much an adjacent impact. And as General Manager Johnson often talks about, transit and housing very much work together in a lot of ways. And so there was a bill, it is bill number, House Bill 241313, and that title is Concerning Measures to Increase the Affordability of Housing in Transit-Oriented Communities. RTD staff has provided technical considerations for lawmakers and the governor's office on questions related to transit-oriented development in communities. That said, staff is still digesting that bill, but wanted to make sure that the committee was aware, and there has been some media reports also related to that bill, but we'll be following that, and it was just introduced. Lastly, regarding potential legislation, and also reported by local media outlets that you all may have seen, there was a draft summary document circulated on potential legislation that would impact RTD. The document's really titled Transit Reform and Governance, and that focuses on 4 main policy areas. The first focus, titled Improve Decision-Making and Collaboration with Regional and Local Planning, Support Training for Transit Operators Across the State, Budget and Reporting Transparency, and lastly, Board Reform. Again, I would say this is very much a summary document. There is no actual legislation. Staff has not seen any actual bill language. With that being said, it's very difficult to take the summary concepts at a very 30,000-foot level that are stated in this document and translate that into something concrete that I can report to the board. It really would need to see legislative language to be able to give a concrete report on what might come of this potential summary document. But with that, I wanted to make sure that I reported it to the board, and we are, of course, working closely with the governor's office, members of the state legislature on this matter. And with that, moving to the local section, as stated in the written report, Director Sloan, myself, and Mr. Kroll did attend the first Metro Mayor's Caucus of 2024. Did have a brief opportunity to summarize that potential bill summary that I just mentioned, and have an opportunity to dialogue with the Metro Mayor's Caucus. Also noted in the report, Director Bouquet, General Manager Johnson, myself, and Chief Fitzgerald and members of his team from Transit Police were able to attend and engage with the Parker Town Council in a study session, and that was on Monday, February 12th, and had a fairly long and extensive dialogue with members of the Town Council, and received a lot of feedback, and overall, I think productive conversation and opportunity to be able to engage with our local lawmakers. With that, I will end my report and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davies. I'll now open up the floor for any questions or comments from directors, starting with Secretary Guzman, please.
Sorry, I'm just full of questions today.
Great.
Mr. Davies, do you know, or maybe Madam GM CEO, when the next LUTI committee will be meeting with RTC as a guest for the Denver City Council? Also, the TLRC invitation to speak before the joint committee. I just want to make sure that I get those locked down on my calendar so that I can be available to show up and support and stand behind and be there with you all. And if we don't know those dates right now, that's okay, but can we get them out as soon as you have an awareness of them, so that all board members who are capable of going and able to arrive can be present? I think that showing a strong presence at those meetings has had quite an impact, and getting to see faces that we run into at the grocery store or at events is helpful so that we can know who we're talking to. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
certainly.
much, Secretary Guzman. Yeah, Mr. Davies, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Thank you. And certainly, Mr. Guzman, don't have the dates off the top of my head, but we'll make sure that that information is circulated.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. And again, this is, I think, Secretary Guzman, thank you for the question and the coordination on this. There's an opportunity here, I think, to coordinate schedules between Mr. Davies, you and your office, and the board office of Mr. Kroll, and we can make sure to disseminate information out for the whole board's benefit. Thank you very much for that question. Director Tisdale, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think this comes under the purview of government relations, and I wondered if I could gauge the appetite of the executive committee for potentially issuing a resolution of commendation to Nuria Fernandez upon the event of her retirement from the FTA as the administrator of FTA. Nuria has been a good friend of RTD in Denver, very supportive of us. She knows a number of us personally, and I wondered whether it might be something that we would be interested in doing, because I think her last day was yesterday, I forget, but I was wondering whether we might want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. I'll open up the floor for any comments from directors regarding your request to consider a commendation. Yes, please, Second Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thank you. Director Tisdale, what is it you're proposing? What's the commendation?
Just to congratulate her upon her successful career as the administrator of the FTA and working so collaboratively with transit agencies across the country, including RTD Denver.
A letter from
Yeah.
the board. Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you for the question, Second Vice Chair Geisinger. Just to clarify on that final question there, Director Tisdale, that you'd be seeking a letter to go out from RTD. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, I think perhaps a letter, we could do it in the form of a letter that says this reflects a resolution of the RTD board commending Nuria Fernandez on a successful term as the administrator of the FTA and thanking her for her continued collaboration and cooperation with transit agencies across the country, including RTD Denver. As simple as that.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Other comments on that matter? I know we're still in government relations here, but from executive committee members, given the question from Director Tisdale. Director Ruscia, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I raised my hand to speak on general matters and government relations. I have no comment on Director Tisdale's proposition.
Okay, thank you. Further comments from executive committee members regarding a letter of commendation? Secretary Guzman, please.
Is there some language that could be drafted so we can take a peek at it? I mean, as simple as what you said sounds fine. And then we can quickly attend to the matter. Would that be something that you'd be amenable to, Director Tisdale?
Director Tisdale, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to do that. I would do it in consultation with Mr. Davies. As I say, I brought it up under government relations because obviously in terms of our outreach to the FTA, which in effect this is, I'd want to make sure that it was something that he had an opportunity to pass on. But yes, it would be about as simple as what I just said. It's a very short, 1 or 2 paragraph letter with about 4 sentences of praise and congratulations.
Thank you, Director Tisdale, and thank you, Secretary Guzman, for asking the question of potentially proposing some language. Given that would engage staff, I'd like to turn to, I see Ms. Johnson, you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Director Tisdale for broaching that. Administrator Fernandez is retiring effective as of tomorrow, and I would just offer that we could help provide some fodder. I will share that I have been privy to some of the celebrations relative to memorializing her 41 plus years in the industry. For y'all's edification, she was deputy administrator during the Clinton administration back in the 90s as well. And so with that as a backdrop, I would say it'd be most advantageous to incorporate some elements, recognizing that she has been in this role for a little over 3 years, and we have acting administrator Vanderpool that will be in that stead. So I could lean in with Michael Davies, recognizing I do have some insight into what's going on in that vein. I would be happy to do so and share that with the board as appropriate. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your comments. And for that, for the sake of keeping track of where we are in the discussion here, I have that Ms. Johnson and Mr. Davies as staff are willing to engage with Director Tisdale on the drafting of some simple language that would go into a letter of commendation. And that would be what we're gauging feedback on here. I do see that Mr. Kroll, your hand is raised. I'll call on you and I thank my fellow directors for the patience here. Mr. Kroll, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just approaching this from an administrative perspective. Director Tisdale used the word resolution. So would it be your intent, Director Tisdale, to have this appear again on an agenda for the full board to approve? Or in the interest of time, is this something that, the consensus can be reached that the letter goes out without a vote of the board? I just want to make sure, because we have the meeting next week and we've got a packet coming, and the agenda and all of the above there.
Director Tisdale?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You raise an excellent point, and I prefer the phrasing a letter of commendation. And we could technically have a letter of commendation from the executive committee, and this committee could simply authorize that now. It might be better because I think other board members would want to have the opportunity to weigh in if we could somehow bring this up. Perhaps even under other matters in the meeting on Tuesday, and say that we want to send a brief letter of commendation to Nuria Fernandez, congratulating her on a successful career in transit and a successful term as administrator of the FTA, and just make it what we sometimes in the past have called a head nod approval by the board.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Mr. Kroll?
That would be perfectly reasonable for us to accommodate if that works also for GM CEO Johnson and Michael Davies. We would be happy to add in the agenda. You all have just voted to approve the agenda though. So we wouldn't necessarily add a bullet point, but everyone would know that this is coming, if that's fair. Okay. At least everyone who's on this call and is aware of the conversation that came here, that Director Tisdale would raise this matter under other matters and seek consensus at that point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Thank you, Mr. Kroll. First Vice Chair Catlin, thank you for your patience. Please go ahead.
I actually had a similar question as Mr. Kroll, and I just didn't know if we had any precedent or anything that we had done before of a similar vein. I'm in support of this, certainly, and with GM CEO Johnson's support and Michael Davies' support, I think it's appropriate. I just wasn't sure what we had perhaps done in the past in a similar situation.
Thank you, First Vice Chair Catlin. Mr. Kroll, I think maybe we could offline, if you wouldn't mind looking at what, if anything, had been done in the past, could be helpful context as one is drafted. Certainly, I am open to the idea, then I appreciate the discussion and consensus arrival here that we would draft a letter of commendation to be brought up in other matters, that letter being drafted by Director Tisdale and General Manager and CEO Johnson and Mr. Michael Davies in coordination with Mr. Kroll in the board office. I think I hear general support on that, so please go ahead and provide what that draft would be. Thank you. We'll now continue the discussion on the government relations report provided by Mr. Davies. Director Ruchet, I believe you said you had a comment under government relations, so please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to note that the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure at the City of Denver, which we call DOTI, will be presenting to Land Use Transportation Infrastructure, the LUTI Committee, on March 5th regarding the city's policy on bus stops and prioritization. I think that matter would be of interest to a couple of us on this call, but if I forward that information to Mr. Kroll, perhaps he can also share that as well. And then I had a question for Mr. Davies, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Davies, I had emailed you and our chair and our CEO regarding the vulnerable road users bill and enterprise fund bill. And I was just wondering if you would be able to update us on the status of that, and if you were able to ascertain if we might be eligible for future funding if that bill were to pass. My understanding is that under the federal mandate, transit agencies and transit, is part of that conversation. However, under the governor's current plan and the public language of this bill, we would not necessarily qualify for state funding as it's currently written. But if you had any other context, that would be helpful. The bill is moving through the legislature pretty quickly.
Thank you, Director Arusha. And just before Mr. Davies, I'll hand to you for that question. I just wanted to acknowledge the first part of the comment. Director Arusha, thank you for highlighting the March 5th meeting regarding policy on bus stops. Yes, certainly of interest. Mr. Kroll, I saw you give the thumbs up. So for the sake of the record, just to note that we'll coordinate through the board office to disseminate that information. Mr. Kroll and staff in the board office, thank you for helping us coordinate. With that, for the second part of the question there, Mr. Davies, I'll open the floor to you if you have any comments in response to Director Arusha's question.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Arusha, for the question. And yes, I'm aware of the bill, and we'll add it to the chart. It's not currently in the legislative tracking chart, so that the board can follow along on this bill as well and read that bill language through the link in that tracking chart. So that will be added to the next tracking chart that's circulated to the board. Specifically with regards to your question, it appears that RTD is an eligible entity for this potential grant fund should this bill pass and be approved and the grant fund be created, that RTD would be an entity that could apply for that. The bill does outline, and I think this is what you were stating in your remarks there, does outline a number of eligible projects that this grant funds could be used on. And I could speculate that there are potential projects that RTD could interact with local sponsors in regards to safety measures at crossings, et cetera. So I think I'd leave it at that I think there's always a potential for that intersection, but RTD is an eligible entity.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Director Arusha, follow up, and does that answer your question?
I apologize. I was looking for the button. It sort of does. I just briefly, are you saying that under the current construction of the bill, we are eligible, or are you referencing the federal mandate and that scope? My plain language interpretation of the bill language is that we might not be eligible for these funds if the enterprise was created. And so I guess what I'm asking is, did we get, or can we get clarification from the bill sponsors and the drafter on that?
Mr. Davies?
Yes, I will seek that clarification and get back to you and the committee members and members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Davies, for offering that action to seek clarification on the bill language on the eligibility. And I see Director Arusha, you've lowered your hand. Do you have any further questions or comments?
No, thank you. And I will also depart this meeting so I can catch the FRPR meeting. Thank you for allowing me to attend and provide feedback.
Thank you, Director Arusha. Further questions or comments with respect to the monthly government relations report of February 2024? Thank you very much, Mr. Davies, for your report. Very much look forward to the next one and the continued work. With that, we will move to our final discussion item. This is the proposed amendments to the board operating guidelines. Board Office Executive Manager Kroll, I will call upon you to present the item. I'd like to thank you for your work on this and looking at this. I'd also like to thank Secretary Guzman and Treasurer Bouquet for also offering to look at this and contribute thoughts to the update. So with that, Mr. Kroll, I'll hand off to you to please present the item.
Thank you, Chair Davidson. I'll keep my remarks here relatively brief. You all passed by way of a resolution the initial operating guidelines in 2019. It was the first resolution passed that year. In that resolution, you all made a commitment to revisiting these guidelines at a meeting in the first quarter of each year. And so that's why it's kind of coming back before, just generally regularly looking at these, having directors provide input. Overall, the guidelines are just at their guidelines. They're things that require shared commitment. They take their value and they have their authority through that shared commitment. They're not binding the board to anything. It's just, these are the guidelines you all are setting forth as sort of rules of engagement, terms of engagement for how you all are going to interact together. But they don't really have much substantive authority beyond everyone's shared commitment to them. That being said, Chair Davidson and I did look at these and offer some initial suggestions and changes. And then as you highlighted, Chair Davidson, we also sent these along to Director Guzman and Director Bouquet for some further comment. The goal today is to get some additional feedback from the executive committee and those present on the proposed changes. The proposed changes will then be emailed out to the full board for further comment and consideration, and they'll return to this committee next month, barring any changes to the proposed amendments, or including any changes to the proposed amendments. They'll return to this committee next month as a recommended action, and the full board for approval of that recommended action. To highlight quickly some of the major changes that are here, these derive from best practices that I've seen at the University of Colorado Board of Regents, as well as practices you all are trying to implement and instill. For example, sharing in advance with your colleagues any upcoming or past media appearance that's likely to come forward. So if you're going to be in the press and talking, certainly that doesn't prevent you from doing that, but it's just a good practice under the no surprises idea to share that with your colleagues. Another change that's being proposed is one that's been talked about frequently in the development of work plans and other items this year, is assuming time is afforded to bring large items first as a discussion item to the committee and then as an action item. And then lastly, there was some language included. These aren't by any means the whole list of changes, but just a flavor here for your consideration. There was some language included referencing work plans and the value of working through committee chairs and those work plans to enact policy and conduct the business of the board. I guess maybe one final comment on this is we did update it standard we did bring the document forward from a formatting perspective into what RTD is using now for branding and document formatting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll, for presenting that. And again, thank you for the work on this. Great to be revisiting this. I do think continuing to do so in the first quarter will make sense for this board as we continue to improve our practices with each other. I just would like to highlight, I very much appreciate the sections here calling out how we address policy setting, how we run efficient meetings, how we communicate during meetings, how we collaborate, and how we cooperate. I very much appreciate those sections. And once again, thank you, Treasurer Bouquet and Secretary Guzman, for also lending your voices and input to improving this document. With that, I'll open up the floor for any additional comments or questions from directors or committee members. Again, reminding everyone that the question at hand is by Mr. Kroll, is any additional feedback to further improve these operating guidelines. Director Tisdale, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, as the principal author of the board operating guidelines in 2019, when I served as chair, I truly appreciate and applaud these clarifications and efforts. I think it's an excellent thought, and I'm glad that we are taking up this review. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tisdale, and thank you for your leadership in bringing this to fruition. It's an excellent document for us to have and all be aware of, so thank you for that. Secretary Guzman, please.
So just reviewing quickly the document that we were sent, I'm particularly looking at some of the older supporting documents that, for example, the 2018 through 2019, on our packet, it's page 58. And there's a few older documents in there that talk about board bylaws expectations. Is that just for edification, for knowledge, for historical reference? Do we need to also maybe adjust the language to bring current some of those? Is that an additional task? I'm mystified as to why they're there, but I can kind of see why. So I'm just asking for clarification on that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Guzman. Mr. Kroll, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Secretary Guzman. There was some conversation amongst the board office staff as well as General Counsel Snyder as to whether or not to include the appended memos from prior General Counsel to this board packet item. What we have published currently is on our website, I should say. What you have all currently on your website includes these additional memos. As you can see, some of the changes we're proposing is we're removing explicit reference to these in the actual operating guidelines. I think it is valuable if anyone wanted to dive into some of those practices and bring forward some of those ideas from that into the operating guidelines. But at some point, Director Guzman, I think we're getting to the place where that information is a little dated. Obviously, we have a new general counsel now. Yeah, so the plan moving forward would actually be to remove these as a reference from the documents. But if there was anything of value in there, we wanted to make sure that they were included so that people could have that. And then if they wanted to bring forward anything in those to the operating guidelines, they could.
Great, thank you. That's all I was curious about.
Thank you, Secretary Guzman. Thank you, Mr. Kroll, for the answer and clarification on the plan. Director Tisdale, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point out that the memo from Rolf about executive sessions was very particularly included because at the time there were a couple of directors who had taken the position that they were free to discuss items that were raised in executive session by the board. And we wished to have an opportunity to clarify that executive sessions are executive for all purposes and are not to be commented on by individual directors after those meetings. So it was I'll watch my language here. It was an effort to make sure that we clarified these rules to some people. I think we do not need to have the express reference to them, but I'm glad that they're included here because I think it's helpful for directors to see, particularly as to that item. The other one is a broader kind of conduct of meetings thing, but relative to the executive session and the secrecy of those is something that is always worthwhile to highlight to directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Mr. Kroll, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just because the specific item came up, I want to draw everyone's attention to where that change is at. I'm on page 48 of 64 in the packet. This is under regarding collaboration. The proposed change is to the final 2 statement in that section to honor the confidentiality of discussions had during the course of and in the context of an executive session. That portion is remaining. Obviously, it's, to Director Tisdale's point, very important to maintain the confidentiality of your executive sessions. However, we're proposing to strike the remaining balance of that, which references this specific memo.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Further comments or questions on these guidelines? Given that these are, that Mr. Kroll is seeking some feedback here, I certainly invite members of this committee as well as other directors to engage with Mr. Kroll as these are finalized and before they come before all of us. Again, I just would like to thank you, Mr. Kroll, for dusting this off and looking at this Very, very important for us to be efficient. I would note that I especially am pleased to see the inclusion of, when time allows, bringing major decisions and policy decisions forward as discussion items prior to being recommended actions. I think that has worked well over the past couple of years on major financial transactions that we have made and the Finance and Planning Committee with respect to stabilizing our fast tracks position in an effort to protect our base system and protect our overall system. There were some very creative maneuvers and important transactions that we were fortunate enough to have the creative staff and leadership to bring forward. It, I think, very much helped the board to have opportunities to discuss, ask questions, and answer those in advance of major decisions. So thank you for the inclusion of that, among other things that have improved here. With that, we'll move off of discussion, our discussion items, and again, just invite directors to reach out with any of these matters to the board office. And I'll now move to other matters and ask if there are any other matters that members of the committee or directors would like to raise. I do see that General Manager and CEO Johnson has raised her hand. I'd like to please open the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to provide some clarification in reference to something that was stated as it relates to Front Range Passenger Rail. For everyone's edification, Front Range Passenger Rail has workshops that are held the third Thursday of the month. Director Ruscia, I believe, was referencing the workshop that was held last week. And then more specifically, I just wanted to clarify that Front Range Passenger Rail board meetings are held the fourth Friday of the month. So I just wanted to share that because I know our executive manager was asked to disseminate a link and I received a private communique relative to that. And I would have been invited to that. So I just wanted to manage everyone's expectations around that. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager and CEO Johnson, for the clarification regarding the workshops and the workshop that happened last week and the fourth Friday of the month meeting of the FRPR. First Vice Chair Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind others that Chair Davidson is scheduled to speak with the Greater Transit Community or what Greater Denver Transit group tonight. And so wish you well. I wish I could attend virtually, but just wanted to thank you for representing the agency.
Thank you very much, First Vice Chair Catlin. And yes, for the benefit of everybody here, I am participating in a Greater Denver Transit meeting this evening, which I understand several directors have done in the past, and have an opportunity tonight to discuss how our system is funded, that we are a taxpayer-funded system and a rider-funded system, and have a chance to dialogue about what our short and midterm financial position is, what our long-term financial position is. For everyone to know, I plan to discuss the challenge that was presented to this board in our mobility plan for the future, which shows potential shortfalls of revenue on a 10-year out plus basis, as well as talk about the impending threats that we have from Tabor. I'll be seeking to inform the Greater Denver Transit this evening about the two challenges that come from Tabor, which of course are the growth limitations as well as the ratchet down effect. And my intent is then to seek the feedback, given their engagement and passion for advocating for transit, as to what we can do collectively at RTD to garner trust and build information and education around these issues to help the community support our riders and our taxpayers in bolstering the resources that will be needed for transit to ensure success. So I look forward to engaging with their group this evening, and I can certainly report back as to what I hear back from that group and similar advocacy groups. So First Vice Chair Catlin, thank you for highlighting that opportunity. I look forward to engaging this evening. Other matters. Great. I just wanted to note one, which is, of course, the retreat is coming this weekend. You will have an email coming that will have the final agenda. I did have a chance to meet with our selected facilitators yesterday to discuss the agenda, as well as to hear the feedback they received from other directors. Sounds like they got quite a bit of feedback from directors. So thank you to everybody who engaged with that. We have arrived at a final draft agenda. I am awaiting that agenda Once I receive that, I will work with the board office to disseminate that along with reminders of the schedule for this upcoming Saturday. I look forward to seeing you all there. There are a number of topics that we'll have to I look forward to engaging on, from agency performance metrics to communication of our true needs and how this agency is funded, how this agency provides service. I look forward to engaging with all of you on that. With that, not seeing any other matters, I thank everybody for taking your time this afternoon. The next executive committee will be scheduled for Thursday, March 21st. And seeing no further discussion, this meeting will be adjourned as of 1:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.